In this session, we're joined by the IDB and the IFC to hear about investment from an international organization's perspective. Listen to what these leaders in this field have to say regarding the impact of investment, how financial organizations look at agri-food tech solutions when implementing agricultural projects, and where startups fit into this process.
Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to be hosting this panel today to talk about the trends that we're seeing in emerging markets and what are the opportunities for technology and startups in this new world post-COVID. And so I want to start by thanking and introducing Prasad Gopalan, the Global Manager for Agribusiness and Forestry at IFC. Thank you for joining us. And Tomas Lopes Teixeira, the Chief Investment Officer of IDB Lab. Thank you both for joining us. Now, I would like to start with quickly allowing each of you to introduce yourselves. So Tomas, let's start with you. Can you please tell us who is IDB and what is IDB Lab?
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you again for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of IDB. I'm Tomas. I lead our investments unit at IDB Lab. IDB Lab is the innovation laboratory of the Inter-American Development Bank Group. With other two entities of the group, we compose what is the Inter-American Development Bank. We are the largest multilateral finance institution for Latin America and the Caribbean. We focus on that part of the world. Agriculture is a key sector in which we all work from the public side, from innovation side, and also from the private sector side to create the synergies and this combined approach to really tackle developmental challenges in agriculture using innovation, using technology, with more and more orientation to new models, new solutions to solve pressing and persistent problems related to agriculture and rural development in LAC.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited for the conversation to dive deeper into that. And Prasad, over to you. Can you please share with us what is IFC?
Sure. Thanks, Daniela. This is a great opportunity for us as well. IFC is the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. And within IFC, agribusiness and forestry is one of the strategic focus for us, both at IFC as well as the World Bank, which does the public sector work. So our strategy is along three key lines. One is to improve food security and nutrition. Second is to improve livelihoods, especially in rural areas and smallholders. And the third is to make sustainability a business driver in all our operations. So to this end, we're probably the largest multilateral investor in the ag sector across the world. Our portfolio is around $6 billion, and we invest between $1 billion and $1.5 billion every year, both debt and equity. And increasingly, we're looking at how to integrate technology into our operations, especially on the investment side, to do direct investments as well as to enable our portfolio companies to adopt technology.
Wow. The scale of what you do is amazing, and you must really be following kind of these global trends, and especially in emerging markets, how this new reality that we're all living in is affecting the agribusinesses, the opportunities for technologies, and really changing the face of what has been classically seen in the agriculture business. So, Prasad, I'd like to start with you in that larger perspective of the emerging markets. What are you seeing? What are the main trends that are happening? Where are the opportunities?
So if I look at agribusiness as a whole, right? So I'll come to the technology space in a little bit. We see opportunities across the board, right? Especially in the post-COVID world, I think we're seeing supply chains are shrinking. There is a trend to go to local production. However, I think trade is as important today as ever, right? To have competitive origin supply where demand is high. So across the space, we operate across the space all the way from inputs. We don't necessarily invest on the farm side because of land issues, but anything to do with inputs outside the farm gate, all the way food production, food processing, distribution, and retail. We invest across the value chain, and we do supply chain financing as well through intermediaries. We see opportunities across the board, right? So if you look at, by and large, you have competitive origins producing competitive commodities, Latin America, Eastern Europe, locations as such, and the demand where the population epicenter is, which is Asia. So I think we're seeing those two as kind of the centers of gravity of supply and demand, and within that we have other regions. Africa is a big focus for us, obviously, especially given the impact of COVID, and it could actually take people back into malnourishment and undernourishment given the economic impact. So our focus on Africa is paramount anyways. So having said that, that's the broader aspect. We focus on those three priority areas across our investments. Coming to AgTech, I think over the last, I would say, 5 years or so, right, we've seen most of the investments in AgTech going into developed countries, but we're seeing a rapid increase. I think, but reports say anywhere from $5 to $6 billion has been raised to invest in this new asset class. What we're also seeing is part of these investments going into emerging markets. So there are interesting trends happening, especially with the post-COVID situation, where where physical access is being limited. There, we're seeing e-commerce and food retail booming. Supply chain digitization is exploding. Our own clients are adopting technology in a huge way, especially on digital technologies, and using things to train people in the supply chain, using virtual reality and things like that. So I see this as an exciting cusp where we are in the agricultural space. This is probably like fintech was to financial sector about maybe 10 years ago. I think we're at a very interesting crossroads where we can use technology in a meaningful way to make impact.
And so glad we're finally there and that we're ready at this time to be there with such challenges at hand. And with that, I want to move this question to Tomas. Tomas, what are the trends that you're seeing, and how does technology play a part? What are the opportunities in the Latin American region today?
Thank you so much, Daniela. And I think it's very aligned to what Prasad just mentioned. I think Latin America and the Caribbean is a huge opportunity, it's a huge market opportunity, it's also a huge impact opportunity. And that's why I think, with the World Bank and IDB as multilateral institutions are paying a lot of attention to this sector. If we see the three main challenges, developmental challenges related to agriculture in Latin America and the Caribbean, I think it becomes clear the size of the opportunity. We have the largest region in terms of production of many of the different crops, including grain, soybeans, corn, and others. And still, we have around 80% of our producers, especially the small and middle-sized producers, they are basically not so far adopting in optimal level technology and advanced practices. So that constitutes a huge market for AgTechs, for agriculture technology, and also for non-technological innovations. We've been seeing some interesting movements also around better managing crops and herds for cattle ranching, amongst others. We do need also to decouple negative environmental impact from expansion in output in agriculture. That's a key priority also for us at IDB. We don't want every time that production increases, and production is set to increase in the coming decades, that to be coupled with deforestation or negative environmental impact. And that's why I think the role of technology is so important. We started 3 years ago, about 3-4 years ago, really to help shaping up these AgTech ecosystem in Latin America and the Caribbean. At the time, there were around 60, 70 startups for AgTech in the region. Now we have more than 600. That's our last market landscaping. We also started investing more actively as anchor investors, both to acceleration programs, to funds, but also directly. This year we've done 4 or 5 investments in AgTech companies, including building this bridge with more advanced ecosystems such as Israel, with great support from SNC and other partners, including in Paraguay, for example. We are piloting a technology with an Israeli company called Suplant, really to help tomato producers to increase their yields using artificial intelligence and other type of practices. So the opportunity is huge. And as Prasad said, we see opportunities along the value chain, the ag value chain. So that includes before, at the farm, and after the farm. Before the farm, that's the world of inputs. We invested in ag insurance, in financing, in new types of also to biological components to diminish the cost of agricultural defense components, which is up to 60% of the cost for small and medium-sized farm holders. At the farm, we see technologies such as precision agriculture, geolocalization of production, controlling environmental impact as huge opportunities. And also for value chains, we see blockchain and other types of mechanisms to help, especially in this post-COVID-19 world, really managing value chains in a more efficient manner.
Thank you, Tomas. This is a great point you're touching on, and the importance of the assistance that you are able to bring to these companies as they solve these challenges. Because as we know, and as we've seen from our experience in emerging markets, these are markets that are less comfortable for startups. They don't understand them. There's a gap. There's a challenge to understand how to access the market, how to grow, and the investors aren't there either, right? Prasad, you mentioned before, you see this jump in investment in agri-tech over the last 4 or 5 years, really coming in developed markets, but that jump, that shift that has to happen to the emerging market context to be able to bring these high value technologies to these markets and help them reach that quickly and scale quickly.
Yep.
And so Prasad, I'm gonna move to you and really ask you kind of what your role is at the IFC, how you work with companies, how you help bridge that gap.
Sure.
And more specifically for our Israeli audience, the Israeli startups kind of watching us here today, I'm really interested to hear kind of how they can engage or what they need to know.
Sure. Look, I think Tom mentioned a few things that are applicable to our work across the world, right? So we look at AgTech in terms of improving productivity, improving supply chain efficiency, and the sustainability and transparency of the entire food system, right? So I think that goes, that's very aligned with what IDB is looking at, and I think there's no debate about that. How we work. So IFC, so we actually are doing a deep dive right now with the World Bank on the public sector side, as well as our own ag advisory group, right? So we're looking at where the state of play of AgTech in our markets and around the world, and what are we going to do in this space? Bringing the World Bank on the public sector side, because you do have an enabling environment requirement in many of these markets, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's digital infrastructure, whether it's aggregating smallholders, enabling environments for a variety of things in terms of marketplaces, supply chain efficiencies, cold chains, food safety requirements. All those are public sector domain kind of activities. So we need the World Bank to set the frame for us to have a thriving AgTech sector ecosystem in our markets, in our emerging markets. Once that's done, so that's where we come in, and then we invest in companies directly in AgTech companies, and also in our traditional companies that we engage in on the production side or processing side or distribution side. We see how companies like AgriTask, right, where when we are advising our clients to engage with smallholders, how can we engage companies like AgriTask? How can we engage clients like companies like C3, who use remote sensing, drone technology, grounded with, ground truthing with physical people on the ground, and with artificial intelligence to improve the way the whole supply chain works, not just the production system, but the entire chain. Because, as you know, in most of our markets, it's you have 30, 40, 50% of food that is wasted. So there's a whole there's a continuum of technologies that can be applied, all the way from inputs, as Tom said, all the way to retail. And we are even investing in e-commerce platforms in emerging markets. We've done a couple of them, and all of them are looking at how to integrate backwards. And there, the application of technology is paramount, in my view. And that actually makes the unit costs become much more affordable, especially for smallholders. So you don't have to aggregate them to an extent that you would if you had traditional systems. So But here we need partners. We obviously can't do it alone. So you have to create an ecosystem whereby we have other multilaterals like IDB, the other bilaterals who are interested in the space like FMO, DEG. We have obviously the local governments, and we have technical partners, right? The companies that are not only in emerging markets but are also in our developed market companies. Like in Israel, you have a super incredibly thriving ecosystem. And by the way, when we did our strategy for AgTech, we were assisted significantly through our speed dating that was arranged by Startup Nation, where we went through a whole bunch of companies and investors to understand how this Israeli ecosystem actually works. And that can be a guiding example to many of our markets, frankly. And that's, to me, it's quite interesting. The key issue, in my view, would be the unit costs and the business case to be built in our markets, where the value addition is not as significant as it is in most developed markets. So if you can actually add value to the basic food system and bring in technology at certain unit costs and have some kind of almost an evangelical way of bringing people together. And look, most farmers believe once they see things happen. They're not just going to go with anyone who comes and says this is great. So I think the proof is in the pudding. So we experiment quite a bit. Our advisory group advises a lot of companies and smallholders in terms of how to adopt technology. I think that's a very significant way of seeding some of these interesting technologies and try to adopt them as they move along the value chain.
Oh, that's a great point, and it's really truly needed. As an Israeli startup, I think you hear these multilaterals, governments. These are all words that startups are afraid of. They're worried about the process, but the opportunity is there, and it's not only an opportunity for startups. The Israeli investors, as you said, there's different roles to play in these partnerships, and with that, Tomas, I kind of wanted to turn to you again. As you see the complementarities between the markets, how do investors play a part in this collaboration?
Yeah, totally, and it's incredible the alignment with what Prasad just mentioned. Let me build on this point of unit economics, because I think that's a key point that it's really kind of a key indicator for us also in the decision making for investments, which is bringing down unit economics so that more farmers can adopt, or more players in the ag value chains can adopt technologies. And that's where we also see some great role of the multilaterals of IDB and World Bank and others to really create synergies with the public sector also, because you see that many of the barriers to adoption of technology in the ag space have to do sometimes with infrastructure such as connectivity or physical infrastructure, also with kind of education and bringing more educational resources to farmers, also measuring impact, measuring kind of the really economic value of solutions. As Prasad mentioned, we need these waves of adoption to come to play, and that happens in general when you have clear benefits. One of the key challenges that we have is to be able to show benefits, even though maybe the payback cycle for certain technologies is a few years, is not immediate. So we've been paying lots of attention to that, and that's one of the examples that I think that is great to build bridges with Israel and to other countries. We've been working a lot with of course Israel, not only in ag, by the way. We have cooperation in health, in education with Mindset, for example, the first acceleration for EdTech in the region. But it's really good to bring messages as to effective and concrete contributions of ag technologies in addressing and creating economic value to producers. That is huge. I mean, this kind of organic incorporation of technology is very important. Is a sector in which you have generally kind of large corporates in Latin America and the Caribbean, with this very fragmented value chain of producers and providers. So the key challenge is really to qualify those along the value chains, because the great corporates, many of them are international. Sometimes they do have access and financing to those to incorporate more technology. But the great challenge and the great opportunity that I see for ag-tech companies in Israel is to really take advantage of this market opportunity in Latin America and the Caribbean, and also cooperate with local companies. One of the things that we see it's very kind of emblematic of the importance of being global in a way. So you have global companies, but also you do need to customize, you do need to adapt at the local level, and that is where I think that cooperation between startups or between corporates and startups from different parts of the world is very key.
I completely agree, and I want to take a few points that you kind of made, but throughout you've been talking about the environmental aspects. So not only being aware of what we need in agriculture, but being conscious of the impact, the wider impact that has. And I'm very happy to see that in the time of COVID, when we're all dealing with additional threatening crises, we're still looking at the technology that we're putting in a responsible way, an impactful way. And with that, I want to thank you both, Prasad and Tomas. Thank you so much for your partnership with Startup Nation Central and for your participation today in this session with us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Daniela. Look, we appreciate all the support Startup Nation has given us, especially as we are launching our ag-tech investment. So hopefully we get to see more collaboration on this.
Amen.
Yeah, same here. Thank you so much, Daniela, SNC. Thank you for the invitation. On behalf of IDB, we're very happy to cooperate with Israel. I think it's a kind of a great bridge to be built that we are building together. And I welcome all to explore opportunities in LAC.
And please join them in the conference today. You will be able to meet with the investors and the partners during the whole conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we've heard from leading international companies and investors about a range of trends, challenges, and possibilities in agri-food going on throughout the world. Don't forget that this coming May 2021, will be Israel's Agri-Food Week, where investors and corporates will have another opportunity to engage Israeli agri-food tech. In the meantime, if you'd like to know more about the sector, navigate to my sector overview that you can find on the platform. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us. Enjoy the remaining B2B sessions.